Hi guys, I've hit 10 million views. Yeah, I know, it's been a while already, but now I figured out a good way to celebrate it, especially now that I've got some extra time because they closed the university building I normally work at. A lot of people have asked me over the years what goes into making a keyboard review, and I thought this would be an excellent subject to explore. So, follow me as we explore the process. Here I've got an old Hi-Tek 725 keyboard with Gundam Black switches in it as an example for this review. Normally this would have been a fairly short project on its own, so this is perfect for this video. Let's see what goes into making a review of this thing. Typically, a keyboard review takes around 1 hour to make per minute of final footage, and an average review is around 7 minutes, so about 7 hours to make per review, not counting testing time. There are 4 stages to every review, and these are never any different. The first stage is testing and prep work, the second stage is scripting, third shooting the footage, and fourth editing. I do the testing well beforehand, and usually a week or more per keyboard. The only exception is keyboards that I can't use, generally because they're not converted yet, or because they're broken or something like that, and the time off that these keyboards give me is what allows me to work ahead, and sometimes for more than a week per keyboard. Occasionally I might even need to revisit an old keyboard to get a good feel of how that compares to something that I'm reviewing at the moment. Usually I only work for a keyboard for a few days at a time and then swap. Usually my desk is a lot fuller than this. It tends to be full of keyboard crap. This one was a bit difficult, as you can see, because it's missing a bunch of keycaps. It was actually in fairly bad condition when I got it, but for the testing phase I just borrowed some keycaps from a compatible keyboard and then took them back off. But it's XT protocol, so usable over USB through one of my Saurus converters, of which I have a bunch. These are real lifesavers, by the way. Also, I have all kinds of other converters, including PS2 ones and all kinds of other tools like cables, calipers, multimeter, scales, etc. Way more stuff yet than just this one box. I've got tons of crap lying around. This is my review schedule. It's always highly subject to change, and I blurred out the name so that you won't get spoiled. But as you can see, my preliminary planning extends into October at the moment. I keep track of how far I've progressed with each review in this schedule as well, and I'm generally working on at least 6 to 10 reviews at a time. At the moment I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, plus half a dozen or so future projects at any time that require extra work, such as customization projects, conversion or restoration jobs, or extra videos like Switch teardowns, unboxings, or the Alps Restoration Guide series. There are even a bunch of external projects running usually. Now, I've found that the best way to get a good feel for keyboards is to test multiple of them at once. So I do one keyboard for a few days, then switch to another, and then the first one again for a bit, etc. The good thing is that this way you get a much wider perspective for a keyboard, and it kind of resets your impressions a bit. You know, if you get away from a board for a while and then come back to it, you may well find a whole bunch of different things that you hadn't thought of or noticed before. I might keep a board on as a backup keyboard, which I put here so that I can play around with it from time to time, or use if the main keyboard doesn't have all the buttons that a normal keyboard has. Generally, I start working on a project at least 2 months in advance, sometimes much more. This one I've had for years. I've just been waiting for the right moment to show it. Now, during the testing period, I already start the second phase, which is the scripting. I script all my videos because the very, very earliest ones, where I didn't do that, often led to me forgetting to include a lot of information, or me just going as I fumbled for words, which I really hate. So I script all my videos. Here's the one for this one. I don't have a teleprompter, so I hope I didn't mess up my lines too badly because I have nothing to remember them with. Now, at first I just make a Google Docs file with short snippets, just general impressions or little things I want to say, or bits of history or links I might find, and at the end of the testing phase I start working through it in earnest. So I look at all the things I want to say, and then I work out a logical order in which I want to tell the story, and then I fill it in from there. This example is a preliminary review of the Focus FK1001, which I'm going to review in God knows when. So for example, in this case, I first note down that it was in poor condition, with keycaps missing, and that I cleaned it up afterwards, as well as first impressions about the key feel and any other things that might stand out from the keyboard. But as I've already reviewed an extremely similar model before, I don't need to cover too much ground here, hence why I can get away with making it such a short episode. Even if I manage to write the bulk of the script in a single sitting, I always go over it at least 4 or 5 times, and usually a lot more than that. And the reason is that every time I go over it, it becomes a little bit more well-refined, or more well-flowing, or I add things that I forgot to put in, or I leave things out that are not actually all that interesting, or I just get a better perspective, etc., etc. This is also why I like to take my time reviewing keyboards, because generally speaking, the longer I spend on a keyboard project, the better the eventual product turns out to be. When I finalize a script, I stick it in a large font and print it, ready for shooting, but even then I frequently make last-minute changes during the shoot. Almost no review is 100% the same in the final cut as it was in the script. For example, here's an old script of the Sony KI9700 keyboard I did recently. You can see the scribblings, additions, or paraphrases everywhere. Sometimes I make marks like this here to help me more quickly find where to continue reading if I have to look away to the board for a second to point at something. So here's the finalized script of the review portion of the keyboard. It's only 14 scenes in total, which is almost nothing. A short 7-minute review typically has around 20 or so scenes, a more average video with a bit more detail in it around 30, and some of the really in-depth long reviews are closer to 60. I think the current record holder is the SteelSeries Apex Pro one at 59 scenes, which got to over 28 minutes in length. Now, typically I shoot the videos achronologically. Generally, the first thing that I do is film build quality and teardown stuff, because they're usually the last things that I script. That way I can just leave a keyboard disassembled without having to disassemble and reassemble again mid-video. Other things that I might shoot first are scenes with props in it, for example, other keyboards or switches. This is just because it's easier to shoot similar scenes and then reorder them again in post-production. For example, in the Sony video, I did all these scenes in blue first, which are all disassembly shots or ones where I'd taken one of the switches out of the keyboard, while in the compact I had 6 different colors to denote scenes where, for example, the compact had to be powered on, or the 5155, or both, or I had both on the table but they were both off, or they were shots from the back, etc. And then afterwards I did all the scenes where it was just the compact from the front powered down. In this video, I did the disassembly scenes first, then the mug shots, then the rest of the review, and then scenes like this. This is actually the 4th last scene to be filmed, as you can see from this camera report. We're right here at the moment. In extremely achronological projects like this, I tend to use a camera report to remind me what order I have to shoot the scenes in, and of what actually went on during some of the takes. So I've got the Hi-Tek here, disassembled and all, and the final draft of the review part of this video. And we're going to start with scene 31, which is the first disassembly scene in this review. So I put that down in front of me but out of frame of the video. I put the camera here, I frame the shot, I check the lighting, that sort of stuff, and then we're ready to shoot. Now, because editing can become a huge mess if you film achronologically, I use a clapperboard to mark the scene number and take number, and to sync the audio and video, which are recorded separately. 25 take 1. So by aligning the clap event on the video and audio, I can make sure they always sync up perfectly. I used to use this old blackboard one, but as you can see, the quality is shit. It just constantly falls apart, and the chalk is kind of messy. So recently I upgraded to a whiteboard slate. I use this big one for the normal scenes, and this tiny cute little insert slate for close-up scenes, which is necessary because this would never fit inside a close-up scene. So this is scene 15 take 1, so I put that in frame, say 15 take 1, close the clapper, take it out frame, and then I can start filming. In most scenes, I record the audio in real time when I'm doing things, but in some cases that's really difficult. For example, when I'm showing keycaps or switches really up close, because it's difficult to keep something like that in frame and in focus without looking at the camera. In that case, I will do a voiceover afterwards. Other cases where I might do that is where I want to give a detailed sound example, because in order to do that properly, I need to suspend the microphone over the keyboard. For example, when I would type now, it would sound like this. Whereas if I suspend the mic over it, you get a much more representative sound sample. When I'm done recording, I stop the sound, for which I use Audacity by the way. You can see it running here now, and I use these numpads here to save the file under a name corresponding to the scene number and type. This is very useful because in reality, even with keyboards that actually work over USB, they're not always plugged in, for example when they're disassembled or turned over. So with these I can always save audio files however I want them. The numpad does the scene numbers, while the macropad does the scene type, such as a voiceover scene, sound effect or picture dub. I also rigged it in such a way that after I stop it, which I'll do now, and file export audio as scene 19, this is scene number 19, enter, I can also use it to close and then no, and then it resets itself for a new recording. Hello and welcome to this review of my Hi-Tek 725 keyboard with Gundam Black switches. I try to do the shooting in one day to minimize differences across the takes, and it usually takes me about 2 to 4 hours per review. Sometimes it's a bit longer though, and I might have to do it across 2 evenings. In this case, it's probably going to take around 4 days to shoot all the footage for this actually. Sometimes I might get lucky and do a scene in a single take, others might take more than a dozen. This one's well underway to being around 15 already actually. The old apartment I lived in was on a very busy street, so quite often motorcycles would come by way too quickly and ruin a take, or the clock tower I lived in might ring and ruin another take and I'd start swearing again probably. But the neighborhood I live in now is much quieter, so a lot fewer takes are ruined by just environmental noises. The editing I usually do over 2 or sometimes 3 days. I can't really do more than 10 to 15 scenes at a time because all the scrolling with the scroll wheel can give me RSI. The editing software I use is Premiere Pro, which Kyle taught me how to use. He's done a degree in filmmaking, so he's helped me with a lot of stuff over the years, including making all the channel art and the intros. So here's all the footage of this video. This is obviously the last scene to be shot in this project. And we're just going to go to the first scene I haven't done yet, which is scene 29 according to the clapperboard. So I just find the audio file to scene 29, which is this one. Let's bring that up a bit further, stick that under, then sync this part here, which is the clap. So just keep zooming in until I can sync that to within a single frame. Yeah, this should be alright, I think. Let's have a look at that.
29 take 1.
Yeah, that seems pretty good. Then I go to the last take. Looks like this had about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 takes or something, so fairly quickly. Start a little bit before, and then let's have a look at what that's like.
This keyboard is missing a fair few keycaps, as you can see, and during the testing period.
That seems pretty good. Then go to the end.
End caps are run for their money.
Stop it here, cut that bit off. Obviously, normally I would go through the entirety of the scene to see if it's properly done, but you get the idea. This is basically how it works. Then, when it's all done, I let it render, upload, and schedule it for 7 AM on a Saturday my time, at least if I manage to finish the review before that time. And with all that said and done, let's have a look at what this mini review turned out to be. Hello and welcome to this review of my Hi-Tek 725 keyboard with Gundam Black switches. I've previously already shown a 725, but that was a long time ago, and this one has a different rare switch type that it's about high time I showed. So think of this as a short redux video that also allows me to show these Gundam switches. The first 725 I showed, which was all the way back in episode 15 in May of 2015, used the earliest type of Space Invader switches most people know, one-eyed white linear switches. I showed that keyboard several times later because although I did a rather botched lube job with it, it did result in a particularly scrumptious key sound which many people really liked. I likened it to blocks of wood hitting each other. These ones though are an even earlier version of Space Invaders, but they don't really look like Space Invaders anymore. It's been likened to soap dispensers or a Gundam, which is their most well-known moniker. Gundam is some kind of Japanese anime series about robots. This is the earliest version of Space Invaders that we know of, and so far I think it's only been spotted in 2 colors, black and white, compared to the myriad of colors the later Space Invaders were made with. As for what these colors mean, no one knows. This keyboard is missing a fair few keycaps, as you can see, and during the testing period I borrowed some keycaps from the other 725 to fill in the blanks, as it were. It was originally in pretty bad shape actually, and some of the switches don't register properly, although I have cleaned it up a little bit. The keycaps are great, by the way. They're thick, dye-sublimed PBT, really give IBM caps a run for their money. As for what the key feel is like, I have several early Space Invaders keyboard with linear one-eyed switches to compare them to the Gundam ones, but frankly it's difficult to feel much of a difference. Space Invaders are fairly sensitive to contamination as well, probably due to lack of a top housing on the switches, which doesn't help the situation. Suffice it to say that the difference between these boards was not big enough for me to detect anything significant, so it seems it was just a slight shape change. The board itself is quite well made indeed. Like the other 725, it's a first generation board, going by NG Coder's Space Invaders classification, and those are built like tanks, comparable in toughness to an IBM Model F, or arguably even surpassing them. It's got a massively thick plastic top housing, one of the thickest and most solid I've ever seen, as well as a metal back panel, bringing the total weight to almost exactly 1.7 kilos. Quite heavy for a keyboard with fewer keys than a TKL. All the parts are screwed securely into the case and chassis too, and there are brass sockets for the screws. Excellent. All in all, quite the bulwark. Plus, it's got spring-loaded feet. As you can see from the PCB, each switch has 4 solder points. This is because each contact also functions as a jumper without the need for an actual separate jumper, which is quite nice from an engineer's perspective, I guess. This is how the switches work. They consist of 2 long arms bent toward each other, and they're separated by a crossbar in the slider. As soon as you press the switch, the bar moves out of the way, the hands are allowed to meet, and the switch closes. Each of these bars simply ends in 2 pins at the bottom, which is how they can function as their own jumper as well. This switch is missing a slider, so I keep a piece of paper in between the hands to prevent it from triggering all the time. It's quite elegant and results in an overall pretty decent key feel if they're clean, although like I said, they're sensitive to contamination and NMB switches were never light. Still, it's not bad at all, and they look cool of course. Overall, it's a very well built keyboard with good switches, excellent keycaps, outstanding build quality, and a good sound to boot. The XT layout is rather antiquated, but if you can live with that, I'm sure it will serve you well. That's it for this review. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and following is a typing demonstration of me typing on this keyboard. So I've got the Hi-Tek here, disassembled and all. Oh fuck. And I put the camera here, normally, and now typically I shoot the films then do that first, reassemble it, and that way I don't... That makes no sense. What the fuck am I babbling on? I often start by filming the... because they are usually the last thing. Generally I start with switch... Oh my god, what the fuck am I on about? Usually the first... Now, typically, the first thing I oh my god. I'm going insane here. Without having to do so... That's not it either. Now, typically, the first... Oh, god. Things with script. Most scenes I record the... Fuck! Especially... Fuck. Yeah, I know. It's been a while ago. Especially as they closed the university building. Yeah, I know. It was a while ago already, but... But now I figured out a good way to celebrate it. Especially... Fuck. Shit. So, follow me as we turn this keyboard into a review. But now I figured out a good way to do it. That was not what was in the script. That was not what was in the script. So follow the process. Fuck! Shit! It's nothing like that. I picked this old Gundam motherfucker. How can this take so long? Hi guys, I've hit 10 million views. And then what? Or I leave things that are not very interesting, or I get a bit... Fucking shit. Even if I manage to write the bulk of a review in a single... And usually takes... Fuck! Shit! I usually do this... I try to do the scene... Fuck! I try to do the shit... I try to do the shoot... Fuck! Shit! Then, when it's all done, I... Shit! Come on! Corona. The first 720... Motherfuck it. Jesus Christ. Ooh. Pretty decent key fill if they're clean. Oh dear. Now I find that the best way than... Well, and the we're right here at the moment. And what was I going to say then? Fuck. Steel Cyrix Apex. The Steel Cyrix Ape. Oh, Jesus, not again. So here's the finalized script of review. So here's the finalized script. No one knows. Let me just put that up real quick. I forgot the key that this song plays in. No one knows